I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation Township of Puslinch on November 10th, 2021. I will start with roll call. Councillor Goyda.
Present.
Councillor Spoulos.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Balmer.
Present.
Excellent. And this will commence our moment of reflection. Okay, that concludes our moment of reflection. Ms. White Fox, could you read out the confirmation of the agenda, please?
Council approves the November 10th, 2021 agenda as circulated.
You move for that, please. Councillor Spoulos, seconded by Councillor Balmer.
Yes.
And all in favor, Councillor Goyda,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
Favor.
and Councillor Balmer. He said in favor. Did he say in favor? It's passed anyways. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest today? Nope. Okay. All right. Chief, I believe it's your report.
All right, good morning, Your Worship, Council. Thanks very much for the opportunity to present this report. The bulk of this report arises out of your June meeting. And there were a number of questions, I understand it, as it relates both to perhaps a second fire station in the municipality and the general operation of the fire department. I just have a couple of opening comments. The first is that it's my responsibility to make sure that council knows what their fire department is doing. And this meeting actually fulfills that obligation. Throughout the report, I've touched on a couple of key items, and I have no intention of reading the whole report. But there are a couple of key items. One of them concerns daytime response time, and the CAO and I had a good discussion that led me to contacting the Office of the Fire Marshal about how response times got to where they are versus where they may have been 10 years ago. We report our information to the Office of the Fire Marshal on a quarterly basis, and they have all of the information. Unfortunately, they really don't do anything with it. They just store it and house it, and if something bad happens, they'll reach into our data and then perhaps jump on us if something untoward happens in the community. And that's a little bit different than the way police reports and EMS reports are handled. But at any rate, there's no proactive action taken on behalf of the office. The other issue concerns daytime availability of volunteer firefighters. And essentially, we have approximately 40 volunteer firefighters. And during the day, we have about 10% or 4 or 5 out on the first truck, and perhaps a handful of firefighters following on. I don't want to leave council with the impression that we are in dire circumstances. I have to tell you that since I've been here, there have been over 240 calls for service. And only on 3 of those calls have people approached me, or their insurance company approached me after the fire, saying they expected something different or they expected something more. So it's not like your fire department has ever received a written complaint about the delivery of fire protection. I think that people realize we live in a rural community or rural communities, and the delivery is a little bit different. We're a little bit handicapped, I suppose, to the extent that we have 100,000 cars traveling on that 401 every day, and that is generating a substantial call volume. I just want to talk a bit about the commitment of the volunteer firefighters, and they're all in it for the right reason, to serve the community, to learn new skills, and to help their neighbor. But society being what it is, and community volunteerism being what it is, and we look at 24 hours in a day, we find that 14 hours of the day are lost to people traveling to, returning from, and working at employment. 8 hours are lost to sleep. They only have 3 or 4 hours to give to the community, and 40 of them have chosen to give it through the fire department. There are a lot more opportunities for people to use their time for other recreational purposes. Many of them have cottages or family residences outside of the community, and certainly in the summer we're challenged, and many of the people do leave the community for those reasons, not unlike the rest of the civil population. I just want to say that we're about to recognize 3 of our volunteer firefighters for over 35 years of service each. It's a total of 105 years of service. And you've heard it said about different people before. They don't make them like that anymore. We're not going to have a bunch of people with 20, 30, 35, 40 years of service. The way society is today, if we get between 5 and 7 years of service out of a volunteer firefighter, we've done very well for ourselves. The current model of using volunteer firefighters is only going to last a short period of time, in my view, without some other support to the system. So I have a couple of comments to make with respect to Station 2 first, and then we'll get into some of the other questions that council had. You have the report in front of you. I think that when the original discussion about Station 2 took place, it talked about a satellite station. And I'm not sure, with things being the way they are in terms of available firefighters and whatnot, that using it as strictly a satellite station and placing apparatus perhaps on the west side of the municipality is going to solve a problem. The cost in order to establish the fire station, in my mind, is high. And if we were to purchase additional apparatus, that adds to the cost. The master fire plan talked about a location near Concession 2 and Side Road 10 South as being the best location if council were to go down that line. Again, we were talking about 30 additional firefighters. Simply taking the existing 40 firefighters and splitting them between 2 fire stations would not be optimum, in my view, and I think it jeopardizes the Superior Tanker Shuttle accreditation that we currently enjoy. If there was a fire station on the west side of the municipality, it would look at maybe between 120 and 140 calls a year on their own if they had a reliable, consistent response. And then the rest of the calls would be covered by the main station or by both stations in the event of a large fire. There's been no discussion about a third fire station anywhere in the municipality, and I think that for the time being, unless there's a demonstrated need elsewhere, I don't think that a third fire station should even be in the discussion right now. I have talked a bit about some areas of the municipality that may benefit from fire protection agreements with either Guelph or Cambridge. But in speaking with the fire chief in Cambridge, I think that they would be amenable to perhaps picking up some additional service area in the township of Puss Lynch. I've had brief discussions with Guelph, and at the present time, I think they'd be reluctant to, and I don't mean to speak on their behalf officially, but my impression is that they may be reluctant to want to end up in a fire protection agreement until our daytime response capabilities improve. So for now, those are my comments with respect to Station 2, pending any questions from council.
Thank you, Chief. I'll open it up to council. Councilor Goida?
Thank you so much for that excellent report. I'm just going to quickly turn my video off here. And thank you also for drawing attention to the commitment of the the volunteers in the fire department. I think, you know, for the volunteers who are working full-time jobs, the commitment to properly train and respond to calls while also still fulfilling commitments at work and home is understandably something that's really difficult to come by. And the fact that there are volunteer firefighters in Puslinch that are celebrating multiple years, as you mentioned, I think is really something special. So thank you for that. In terms of the second station, I kind of looked at it in terms of a cost benefit analysis, and the report identifies that the land and the building, the capital equipment, the upfront cost for that is in and around $4.5 million, plus the annual operating cost of the $400,000 in the first year, followed by $285,000 per year in the preceding years. And in addition to that, although we haven't really gone down this road yet, I would anticipate that in order to come up with the funds to finance the land and the building, that we would probably need to take out a loan. So in addition to the operating costs, in my mind, there would probably also be funds required to service some debt. And also with the new station and the capital required for the building, the equipment, the apparatus, we would also need to incorporate that into our asset management plan and probably have to contribute additional funds on an annual basis to adequately save for those replacements as well. And I agree, these are all huge dollar amounts, and the end result is anticipated for the response times to be similar to what they are now, even with the Cambridge Agreement, while still not addressing and even maybe exacerbating the recruitment retention issue. So to me, the economics of the second station, it doesn't make sense. And I think
Oh, I think we lost.
ultimately the problem we're trying to solve is to have an adequate, oh, sorry, give me a minute. Is it better now?
Yep,
Okay.
you're back.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, the problem we're trying to solve is to have an adequate amount of firefighters on scene and an adequate amount of time to save life and property. And I am having difficulty seeing the clear path as to how the second station will allow us to achieve that. So I think at the present moment, we need to focus our efforts on recruitment and, you know, as has been mentioned, potential other agreements that will ensure that we can have enough firefighters on scene and keep a healthy number of volunteers before we look at spreading them, you know, more thinly across two stations. So I don't really have any questions. That's just the way I've processed my thoughts on that second station.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, thank you very much, Brad, for acting as the fire chief. It's a daunting role to be for a while, type of thing. I'll make a couple of comments. First of all, I don't have a problem supporting the recommendations. The question I have is a series of questions on the report, just for clarification, more so than challenging the recommendations. Before we get into that, you mentioned the volunteer fire department is going to be by the way of the dodo in a few years. Like, what's your anticipation of that, time-wise?
Well, I think that we have to have a more fulsome discussion on what the actual level of service is that council expects to provide and what the ratepayers expect from the fire department. If they're happy with what we have right now, and for the most part, as much as I may be concerned, it appears that the ratepayers are happy. You may be able to continue this model for 3 or 4 more years. I am concerned. I have to tell you about the traffic on the 401, access to the fire station when the 401 is closed. I mean, we just went through a 10-hour closure of the 401 westbound yesterday, and during the day we couldn't get firefighters to the fire station. And that's becoming far more frequent. I'm afraid that that's going to become even more frequent when the construction starts. I've also expressed to the CAO, I have a concern about the large industrial commercial property below Aberfoyle, above the QEW, or I'm sorry, the 401, and our ability to fight a major fire during the day there. And you know, it seems that the solution is always, but we'll call our neighbors. Well, with respect, except for Guelph and Cambridge, all of our neighbors are in the same boat we are. So the experiences that we are finding now in Puslinch is exactly what all of our neighbors are finding. So, you know, I would like to say I would like to wait until the construction of the 401 is done through Puslinch. I do have a gross concern about the daytime response capability just in general. So, you know, if council's happy with the level of service and the ratepayers are happy with the level of service, I think you have a handful of years going forward to rely on this model. But having said that, you may have to look at an interim solution for a short period of time until we can get recruitment completed and or the construction on the 401 is completed. I have the advantage of having worked in Milton for a year and a half when the construction started on the 401 from Winston Churchill through to the west side of Highway 25. And we had a pumper out on the highway probably 8 hours a day. I spoke to the deputy there 2 days ago on another matter, and they're still experiencing large call volumes on the 401. And I'm just not sure that without an alternate solution, we're going to be able to service those types of calls. I think I've answered your question. I know I've added more to it than you expected.
Okay, let's start with the report. Your recommendation one says hold off until there's a demonstrated need for a second fire station. What would be considered a demonstrated need?
So a demonstrated to me would be a significant increase in call volume. It would include Cambridge either, and with the greatest respect, I'm just running a scenario by you. I have no reason to expect this would happen, but if the cost became if the cost changed to such an amount that it was no longer economical for Puslinch, or if Cambridge decided for whatever reason, because of litigation or staffing or whatever, if they had to shut a fire station down, they were just no longer able to service the area, then I think that those would generate a demonstrated need for a fire station on the west side of the municipality.
Okay. Next question related to the intended configuration layout of the facility. The Fire Master Plan report had a sort of a significantly smaller facility, and whereas your report cites pretty well a maybe doubling or tripling of what was in that report. Can you just comment on the rationale for the change?
Well, I think that there are two things that have changed since the master fire plan was received by council, I think in 2015. First of all, it's the post-disaster construction requirements in the building code for critical infrastructure, and the fire station falls in that category. When I worked for the Office of the Fire Marshal, we were putting up essentially insulated pole barns with unit heaters and a little office and a bathroom, and that was satisfactory at the time. But because of the building code requirements now, the structure has to be somewhat more robust than they have in the past. So what I have given you there is a fire station that would meet the needs of the community going forward for the next 50 years. The other part of it has to be accessible. It has to be gender neutral. Has to have shower facilities, and that I have not outfitted that station as if it were a satellite to the current station. I have outfitted that station as if it were a standalone fire station. Because one of the questions we have even within the fire department is if we had a satellite fire station, would we all train together? And ideally we would, because we work together as a team, we work together as a single work unit. There's not enough training space at the current station to take on another 20 or 30 firefighters. So there are other issues that have to be addressed rather than just a facility to store trucks.
Okay, next, the issue of getting dependable firefighters for during the business week. Is there anything else that should be looked at to be done to improve the situation?
Not using the current model. I can tell you we've just completed a recruitment. That is, we've had the intake. So we've had the intake. We had approximately 25 people apply. Only 3 of them are from Puslinch. The rest are from either Guelph, Milton, or Cambridge. So in the report, I talk a little bit about the demographics and the income in the community. And generally speaking, the higher people's income, the less interested they are in being a volunteer firefighter. They're more interested in paying to have firefighters available. So again, I think that I would like to come back to you with a more fulsome report and talk about some options that don't include full-time employees. When you look at your the number of calls your department responds to, except perhaps during the 2020, which was COVID, it's a busy fire station. And I think that with that industrial commercial south of Aberfoyle and the trailer parks and the cottages over at Puslinch Lake, I do get concerned about our ability to fight a major incident during the day. We can do a little car accident fender bender, one medical call involving one person, and we can do some exterior firefighting, but nobody should be left with the impression that 3 or 4 people can fight a fully involved house fire by themselves. That just isn't going to happen. Anecdotally, what I can tell you is that at the end of August, the department was out at servicing a call on the 401, and it took a while to get out to the 401, but on their way back, they had a double drowning at Mini Lakes. They were in the truck, they were available, there were firefighters available at the fire station. They went to the double drowning and they worked with Wellington County EMS and were able to resuscitate both people. And that's because the trucks were available, they were staffed, they were already geared up, ready to go. But I met with the firefighters afterwards. The folks that they resuscitated actually came back to the fire station about 2 weeks ago. And we had a nice chat with the family and whatnot. But at the meeting afterwards, I told the firefighters to just make a note in the notebook, because they're never going to have another call where they resuscitate or participate in the resuscitation of 2 people at the same time. That just doesn't happen. That was a job well done, but it's because there were people in the fire station and the trucks were on the road.
Okay, I'm going to make this last question. An updated fire master plan. What would be the logical timing to have an updated fire master plan? You mentioned some changes to the building code, which sort of obviates the satellite station to a more full-blown station.
So when I work on master fire plans, they're usually developed in 10-year cycles. So I would expect that council would want to be receiving the next master fire plan, 2025, 2026. I wouldn't want to see the waiting for the master fire plan as a cause for not receiving more information and options to improve delivery today. The master fire plan is the path. Now, it certainly didn't take into account some of the industrial growth that's going to take place, the mid-block interchange and the widening of the 401. So I think we've got a couple of challenging years to get through, and during that time would be a good time for the master fire plan to be prepared by a consultant or a third party. Because if that report is ready at the time that the 401 construction is complete, I think that would put council in good stead to map out the future of the fire department for the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Very educational. I really appreciate your expertise and giving us candid comments.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Bailey?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for this this report and your comments. It's a huge learning curve for me here. I think I'm just going to ask a quick question about the second station in terms of coverage. I'm just looking at all the different zones, the map where it shows all the different zones, and I'm wondering if you can just clarify for me which zones would be proposed in the coverage of that second station.
You got me at a disadvantage right now. Just, just give me one moment, please. I believe that by itself, so if the fire station had reliable daytime response and sufficient staffing, and we talked about 30 firefighters, it could cover between the town line and the first concession road or the second concession road west of Highway 6 on its own. And the main station would cover everything else. And in any case, whether there was a large fire on the west side of the municipality or the east side of the municipality, I expect that both fire stations would be deployed to that.
Okay. So just looking at the numbers, I mean, Councillor Goyda went through the cost associated, and when you look at that high cost and then look at the number of calls, it you know, the numbers just don't don't seem to add up in the ratio is what how my brain was working at. It would cover about a quarter of the calls, but cost, you know, a lot more than a quarter of.
So there's probably 50 to 75 calls off the top of my head on an annual basis. If we say 375 to 400 is the typical number of calls for the municipality, between 50 and 75 of them, I would expect that both fire stations would attend, just because they're either equipment intense or they're people intense. So that station by itself may cover 125 calls, but there may be additional calls that it responds with the main station to a major fire over by Arkell, just for the sake of identifying a place in the community. But that would be no different than how Centre Wellington operates its fire department, from a station in Elora and a station in Fergus. Fergus has a fire district, Elora has a fire district, and if they have a major event, both fire stations go. So it's not difficult to manage. It is difficult to put a number on, especially when we know what our daytime response capability is.
Great. So I don't have any more questions about the station, but are we moving on, Mr. Mayor, about other questions, or we're going to wait for Chief to continue with the report?
Well, he's finished his summary on the report. So any questions you have for the chief, you can ask them now.
Yeah, a lot of mine have been asked already, and I don't want to be repeating. A lot of my concerns were just around the retention component. And I know we just had a meeting, or our last meeting, we talked about a social media policy. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the recruitment policy and having it updated or amended to include this social media component, is that sort of in the works, or has that conversation happened?
Sure. So anything fire that's not emergency incident related, particularly with respect to recruitment and retention, will be driven corporately off of the town's website and the town's Twitter account. I'm sorry, the township's Twitter account. And it may be that the fire department Twitter account is used for that. The deputy chief and I have had a meeting with the CAO, and we're trying to work within some strict boundaries with respect to the use of social media. So we will work within the boundaries of the social media account. And if that includes, we can do some retention or recruitment social media posts, then we will go ahead and do that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think a lot of my was just around how to boost that sort of recruitment and wondering if there's any unique, innovative ways we can work on retention. I mean, it sounds.
Well, I go back to my opening comment, if you will. Just the nature of society has changed, and we're going to have to change with it. And at some point, council is going to have to take a look at other delivery models that don't include career staff, not full-time employees. But this is not going to last forever, and the light should be getting larger and larger day by day. Because for me as the fire chief or the deputy, we know that we're not having people long enough to get the experience that those members with 35 years have. And the less experience that people have, the tighter the level of supervision has to be. And that's becoming a real challenge. And it's not just a challenge in Puss Lynch. We can look at the other county fire departments. I can go to Gananoque. I can go to Chatham-Kent. I can go to Emo in Northwestern Ontario. Every one of the volunteer departments in the province is dealing with this. So this is not a made in Puss Lynch problem. And we're looking at best practices, not just throughout the province, but throughout North America. But I do believe at some point the cost of volunteer part-time firefighting is going to start to take off. And I'm going back to my old job at the Office of the Fire Marshal. It sometimes took a while to convince council that, well, utilization of volunteer firefighters is less expensive than full-time. It's not cheap. It's not a cheap labor force, and it's not cheap to run the department. You know, what you save on salary, you're paying out in training and protective clothing over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I look forward to hearing about some of those different models. I really am, just to see what our different options are. So thank you.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Chief. Excellent report. And I'm glad you started out today by talking about part of your role as chief is to keep us aware of what's happening in the fire hall and what's happening with the guys in the fire hall, the girls and the ladies and all the crews. And due to probably COVID and not having our council meetings at the municipal center there, you know, I've really missed having those opportunities to pop into the fire hall and have those casual chats just to see how things are going. And so if you could just, you know, if you could be a two-way conduit as well, I just want to make sure that your members know that they're not forgotten, even though we're not hanging around the fire hall nosing around. We still think of them, or at least I do. And if you could take that message back and keep the channels open both ways, that'd be great. I support a lot of what you're recommending in your report. I've been part of these conversations. I was around for the development of the master fire plan, and I know the challenges you're trying to address. So I'm pleased to see that your recommendations are to continue to make investments in the existing Puss Lynch Fire and Rescue Service. I appreciate that. And you made an excellent point in the report regarding comparing costs, and it's quite easy to see from the chart you prepared that, you know, time is money when it comes to response times. There's a direct correlation between the money spent and the response times obtained. But as you also pointed out, there's no way to do real apples to apples comparisons. There's a lot of situations or circumstances that change within a municipality, and to make sure that I have a good understanding of our situation, and to make sure that we're not, you know, underfunding it based on or making sure that we're appropriately funding the service. I just had a few questions about, if maybe we don't answer them today about how the numbers are presented, but maybe we can look at clarifying some of the details in these numbers. And don't feel like you have to answer these today, because I know you're not the chief financial officer or whatever. You're not Mary, from what I understand. So
Oh, I would never claim to be.
what's that?
I would never claim to be. Math is not my strong point.
No, mine either. That's why we hired her. I guess my concern is I want to make sure we're not overstating the expense of the service we're currently receiving, and because that's never good for either side. It's not good for the residents, and it's not good for the people that are providing the service. I guess is the points I'm trying to get at through these questions. So if I compare it, though, that table gives the total annual operating cost to deliver the service that we're currently providing, or that your team are providing. And I think it's important we understand that is that the total operating cost, or is that the net cost after we subtract the any recoveries which we can get from calls to the MTO, which would ultimately reduce the overall operating cost. Do you know if that's net or total operating expenses?
I don't. The treasurer will be the person to answer that question.
And I think that's it'd be important to have both in the report, so we can understand what our net cost is, because that makes us an outlier in terms of comparing us to, say, Guelph or Moss or Center Wellington, or places that don't have Highway 6 or 401 and the opportunity for those recoveries. So it may make it look like we're spending more than we are for the service we're receiving, because I don't want to make it look like we're getting less than we're paying for, if you know what I mean. The other piece is that we're looking at, the report indicates cost per household, and I'm not sure if that's cost per residential household, cost per asset being protected. Is this taking the monies that we're collecting from our industrial park and dividing that cost amongst the households? So again, making the service look more expensive than it is, because we're only considering that the annual operating costs are coming from the residential uses. Do you know how those are broken down?
I think that one is, in my mind, that one is just the operating budget divided by the number of households on the last census count, or the current building department data, whichever is most current.
Yeah, and that, again, that's a concern, because those operating costs are coming from a variety of asset classes, and
yep.
I just want to make sure they're in there so that we're not overstating what the residents are actually paying for, because we, again, much like the 401, which makes us an outlier, our industrial basis makes us an outlier as well. So we have, not only do we have those to protect, but we have those to contribute to the cost of providing the service. So making sure that we don't make the force look more expensive than it is to the annual average resident, I'd like to make sure in future reports, we make that clear.
Yeah, that's something I can deal with the treasurer on.
Super.
I would expect that at the direction of the CAO at some point in the future, there will probably be a little more data provided to council on a more frequent basis than perhaps has been in the last year.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. It's important to make sure that we have these things in context, and knowing, and the communication back and forth is important for maintaining that context. And I made these comments because when I looked at the numbers, in terms of a cost per household on the chart, we came in, I think, at number 5 from the most expensive. But if we looked at it, I added a column for, what percentage of our total assessment are we spending on fire protection. From the chart provided, we were 3rd from the bottom. So we're nowhere near the most expensive when we look at it from a percentage of total assessment being protected, which suggests there's room to add additional protection, or we can afford to provide additional protection.
Well, I think going forward at some point in the future, and I don't think that that's that far along, I think that council's going to have to look at other investments in the fire service. Yeah. And that's a council-led policy decision. My job's to get the information for you. Council makes the policy-based decision, and the fire department will execute mission.
Absolutely, and that's why I think for council's purposes, we need to have those accurate figures so we know what we can actually, when you come forward with a recommendation, we can put it in the actual context for those decisions. Thanks. You also talked about turnout in your report, and that's a far more complicated piece, because it's not just money, it's people. Well, it's both of them are people, but in this case, it's really, we're talking about people. And I share your concern that I don't know how much more we can ask from those that are turning out time and time again on a regular basis. So I thought maybe you could give me an insight into how is this, it sounds like it's sort of the same people over and over again that are turning out on a regular basis for daytime calls. How is that affecting their morale? How are they holding up in you know, being the point people that are constantly showing up?
Well, unfortunately, there are only a handful of people that are routinely available during the day, just by occupation or shift that they work. So they tolerate responses during the day fairly well. What we have seen is if they're giving a lot during the day, they may not be giving anything overnight, to be quite frank with you. If it's a house fire, that's different, but they're not necessarily coming out for the carbon monoxide call or the, an alarm that's gone off 3 times this week at a particular property or anything like that. So they find a way to, for the most part, they find a way to tolerate it and make it work in their family situation. And if we have 5 or 6 people that are routinely available during the day, the way they work that schedule is different amongst all 5 or 6 of those people. They do what works for them. And quite frankly, there are some people that we don't necessarily see at night because they're giving it all during the day. And I don't have a particular issue with that. But further to the question, I can tell you that the deputy chief and I, we monitor attendance and participation on a monthly basis. And when we've identified some people that quite frankly, their status in life has changed. Either they've changed jobs, they've gone to another shift, their wife or significant other has picked up another job or a shift, and they're not able to give as much this year as they did the previous 5 or 6. So we try to find a solution that will, and Chief Gomes did the same thing. We look for a solution to the attendance problem and the training problem. But we also tell people that we appreciate everything that you've done, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, we appreciate everything that you've done, but you're taking up a valuable space in the organization. Why don't you consider taking a leave of absence for a year or 2? We're going to be here in 2 years. We're not going anywhere. We got a monopoly on the delivery of service, right?
Yeah.
And if they were a good performer 5 years ago and they get through whatever's going on with their family, their job, their health, whatever, we're still going to be here. Leave on good terms and come back, and there'll be a place here for you. And we've had people that have been gone for 2 or 3 years to get through what they're getting through, or they've relocated back to the area again because jobs change or the work site changes, and we insert them back into the organization. We have to do some mandatory training with them, but for a lot of people, and we've had people go to other fire departments as well, they're pretty basic skills, and unless you haven't performed them for 3 or 4 years, they come back fairly quickly. And we're happy to bring people back, and the door's always open.
Well, that's good. Because I must admit, when I read in your report that it's going to take up to 12 months to really bring the new recruits online, I was concerned about burning out those that are taking the brunt of the daytime calls, which goes to the point of, I think you and Councillor Sapoulas talked about, does this mean that maybe in the interim, these next 12 months or 2 years, are we be looking at possibly composite coverage during the day? Having guys paid to be in the hall part-time to ease the burden of calling people out?
Well, I mean, that's certainly an option to look at. The reason that I like that idea is there is always work to be done, right, within the fire station. First of all, it would reduce our overall response time. And they could also pick up some of the, with a bit of additional training, they could pick up some of the re-inspections that had been initiated by the fire prevention officer, and we could probably do more, but you have to be aware that it costs more. So
that's where we started. Time is money.
Yeah,
No, I
well,
appreciate that.
yeah, it's time and money for you, but in our job, everything is based on time and distance,
Yes.
right? It's just a time and distance operation. Effectiveness, I go back to that double drowning at the end of the summer. If that had been a regular day, I'm not sure that the outcome would have been the same. It may have been the paramedics by themselves a lot longer than they were. I mean, they did outstanding work. Our people, I suppose, were just the muscle to get things done, but the paramedics led that both of those resuscitations. Good example of teamwork, probably the best one I've seen since I've been here.
Thank you for mentioning that again, because that was part of the master fire plan in the past. Was the real big help that I got from that was when they broke down the response time number into its three components: the dispatch time, the turnout time, and the travel time. And those, when someone's in the hall, the travel time component it goes to 0, which certainly addresses a lot of those concerns about overall response time, and for exactly the case you just talked about at Mini Lakes. I guess, let's see, give me a second. Regarding the recommendation to defer the satellite station option, I don't disagree at all with the recommendation to maximize the our existing infrastructure before we add more. But at the same time, I just want to make sure that I don't want to throw away or suggest we're throwing away all the good work that members of your department put into developing the proposal that was considered by the fire master plan, and that we're now saying isn't appropriate, because that was a team effort to produce that option, because it was looking at I think, to be fair, they were doing that, comparing going to, say, full-time, some people full-time in the hall 24/7, the cost of that, and tasked with trying to come up with an alternative that did maximize the use of existing equipment, rolling stock at least, building that modest, as you said, the insulated pole barn, redeploying some of the team to maximize the use of people, but also to increase recruitment opportunities and reduce turnout time for the west side. So the turnout time for people in the west side of township, for the members of the force, would decrease. Their turnout time would go down, and by having a station closer to the east side of Cambridge, we'd have increased recruitment opportunities there. So they did a lot of work putting that proposal together. They did studies. They did a test run. They even went out and had it all audited by an auditor. And I just I want to make sure that we acknowledge all that work that went into it. And I appreciate Councillor Zapoulis's question regarding the change from that proposal to what you're proposing, because it is a significant change. We're no longer comparing to the same option. So if you could take back, at least to the guys or to the team, that I don't see that we're throwing all that work away. I don't think it's lost, and I appreciate all the time they put into developing it, because it was to respond maybe to a different ask and to a different question. Let's see. I got a couple questions actually after that statement. Sorry, just give me a second, Chief. I have to scroll down through my stuff. Oh yeah, and to be fair, the master fire plan did recognize that even that satellite substation would have increased the service level beyond what was the minimum provided by the, I think it's the OFFPA, is that the name of the act? So
Yes.
I recognize it was going over and above. But that being said, it still raises the question about throwing it all away, but Councillor Stapoulis already asked that, so thanks. Oh, interesting. You talk about in the report expanding the Cambridge coverage area, and you mentioned it again today, they might be interested in doing that. But in the report, you mentioned only going to Forrestal Road, not all the way to Laird or all the way to, you know, to the Speed River where, or pretty much to 24. Is there a reason why they'd only go to Forrestal Road if we expanded it and still leave that last concession of the west side uncovered?
Yeah, I had that discussion with the chief in Cambridge, because it just leaves a small tip essentially uncovered, and that's about the maximum point he's prepared to release his apparatus to.
Oh.
And I think that his thought was that if we were going to enter into a discussion with Guelph at some point in the future, Guelph would pick that up. So that was the thinking there. I mean, if it was council's will at some point in the future for them to cover the whole area, I think that they would take a look at doing it after discussion with the fire chief or the CAO in the city of Guelph, because it may make more sense that the city of Guelph would cover that area if they were willing to enter into a fire protection agreement.
Understood, since their station is effectively on Laird Road / Clare Road.
Yep.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And you know, that'd be probably done around the same time if we discussed any discussions regarding the Arkle area. Yeah, there was a question that you addressed in the report regarding the services that Cambridge does or doesn't provide. Again, from the fire master plan, it was pointed out that because the Cambridge is not certified for the super tanker or superior tanker shuttle, the residents on that side don't get that benefit. But do they get it now because they're distance away from our existing hall? So would there be any significant change?
I believe the residents still get the tanker shuttle accreditation in the area covered by Guelph, or I'm sorry, by Cambridge, pardon me. I believe that they do get that credit. I would have to check with check the underwriter's map, because what happens operationally is if Cambridge has a working fire in the area that they protect for us, they call for us automatically.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't happen very often. I mean, there aren't a lot of building fires in that bit of area that they do cover, but they would automatically call us. And in fact, we would call several other fire departments with tankers as well. So I will have to check the tanker map to see whether they enjoy the same accreditation. I was under the impression they did. So through the CAO, I will find out for you and get an answer back to all of you on that particular issue.
Yeah, thank you, because the master plan says it doesn't, and Chief Gomes indicated they don't man that. The pumper isn't manned at the station that services.
No,
that area.
I understand that is true. There isn't a person assigned aboard the tanker. They do have to make some logistical changes. So let me check back with the underwriters. But the other part of that I know is true. If they have a working fire in the area that they protect for us, we are called automatically.
Right.
I don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to go back and just comment on the work that's been done about Station 2 or the satellite station.
Yep.
So that
Feel free to cut me off anytime. That's okay with me.
Does that work for me too?
No.
That work is not for naught, and it's not, you know, culturally and traditionally in the organization, it won't be forgotten. I think the exercise is still valuable. It will be valuable next year and the year after. I think that we have bigger fish to fry right now. But if the risk in that area of the municipality changes, I mean, that is another reason that would be a demonstrated need to take another look at a fire station there. If the risk changes, if all of a sudden there's a large estate settlement put in there, or if there's a commercial industrial, I don't think it's zoned for that right now, but if something else went in there, so that works not for naught. It's just not right now. That's all.
Good, thank you very
And
much.
I'll be meeting with the firefighters tonight at 7:30 anyway, and I will convey that to them. It's not that the answer is no, it's just no, not today.
Yeah, I
That's all.
appreciate that.
And you know, it may be that we have to, at some point in the future, take a look at a more bare bones building for that satellite fire station or station 2, whatever you call it. We just have to be careful and ensure that it's actually in compliance with the legislation. Your report was 2015. We're almost 7 years past that report. So that's the process that I followed in coming up with those responses.
Perfect, thank you. That more than addresses my concern. I appreciate that. The last, I guess I have two more little points. In the report, both the fire master plan and your report talks about not just an expanded area, but maybe alternate levels of response in an expanded area. And I didn't hear anything in your report about a different level of response in an expanded area. The master fire plan talked about maybe not a full response, and I don't know if that's fair to the folks on the trucks coming from Cambridge to have less than the same response. How do you see that in terms of the expanded area? Would it be the same response to the existing coverage area? Or would it be a reduced response from Cambridge to the expanded area?
If the area were to be expanded, it would be my recommendation that it's the same.
Okay.
It's the same level of service. Yeah, I just I don't see a model where we would ask Cambridge to come, but only come with 3 people on 1 truck. I just don't see it. They run their fire department their way with the resources they have. I think that we would just leave the level of service as the level of service they currently provide to the part that we have with them now.
Perfect. So the last question I have relates to a comment you made earlier in response to, you were discussing not only the timing of the next fire master plan, which I think is going to work out well, but the reconstruction of 401, the idea of perhaps understanding the need to move the fire hall off the EDR so it doesn't get blocked in. I guess that would be considered as part of the next fire master plan. Once the interchange is built, if the rest of the Highway 6 or Highway 401 is expanded, that would be one of the things might be considered as part of the next master fire plan, would it?
I would think so. The EDR presents problems. It's probably in the time that I've been here, so 11 months, it's presented operational problems probably once a month. And as long as you're not having a bad day, it's no problem.
Yeah.
But the last accident we had the other night, I mean, it was tied up to 10 o'clock, quarter to 11. So it was tied up for a long time, and it's, you know what the traffic is probably better than I do, but I can't get firefighters in, and if I can't get them in, they can't perform.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the work you've put into this, and I appreciate the depth of experience and knowledge that you've brought to our fire department. And I'm sure we'll all benefit from it in the long run. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Chief, for your report. It was an excellent report. There's a lot of things I want to touch on here. I'm going to bounce all over the place. We were just speaking about the EDR. It'd probably be easier to move the EDR than to move the fire station. So I would appreciate council's indulgence to ask for a delegation at Roma to the MTO, specifically around the EDR. So here's the scenario. I had to take my kid to hockey at 6. He was on the ice 6:45 that day. I come up over the bridge, see the roads closed, all the traffic's going down Brock Road. I busted a U-turn and went all the way over to Victoria and around. You know, if they're going to close the 401, then maybe the contractor that is responsible for that would also direct traffic down concession 7 and have, you know, temporary lights installed along the route to get them back over to the Hanlon. You know, the responsibility shouldn't just be of closing the 401. They should be responsible for that traffic until it's back onto the 401 is what I'm essentially saying. And with the mid-block interchange being constructed, I mentioned this at our previous council meeting, that an EDR preferred route is at controlled intersections. So concession 7 didn't meet that criteria at 34 before. Once the mid-block is completed, it will meet that criteria. So until that point, I think we should delegate to the MTO to say, if you're going to close the 401, then they bring in, is it MCON? No, it's not MCON now. I think it changed. Anyways, whatever the company is, that they provide traffic guidance throughout the township so that 34 isn't jammed up. I could possibly follow back up with you on that one. I should have started with, you know, the comments you made about the firefighters. I appreciate it. I understand it is a huge commitment. The demographic of our community has changed. You know, both partners are both working. So now if the pager goes off, you don't have somebody there to look after your kids. Well, you run out the door. You know, it's not a major farming community anymore, right? It's even the farmers. I mean, that's, I believe, why training was Wednesday night, so the farmers could finish their work, you know, in the fields and tending the livestock, and then come to training. And that's changed. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that the fire department has been adaptive. And I'm not sure if you're aware, Chief, I was a 14-year veteran of Wilson's Fire Service. And it was nice to hear you being adaptive to specific circumstances to your team, because when I had my first son, my wife and I were both on the fire department. When I approached the chief the deputy chief at the time, I said, like, you know, one of us has to stay home. You know, we're on the same shift, so can we make some sort of arrangement to keep up our training and keep up our attendance? And the answer was no. You have a decision to make. Either they were going to move us on to separate weekends. So being a full-time firefighter, I would be on call one weekend. My wife would be on call one weekend. I'd work the next two. You know what the decision was made? 25 years of you know, experience walked out the door that day. So it's wonderful to hear that it's not just, oh, look, that attendance, that's not good enough. You're out of here, right? You recognize that some provide coverage through the day, some at nights, and you make your team work. That's excellent news. You know, when you mentioned that 3 applicants were from Plessinch alone, I'll be honest with you, Chief. I'm old school. I like the idea of residents from Plessinch serving Plessinch, but the reality of the situation was, and when I spoke about the fire department being adaptive, is they opened up the boundary into the south end of Guelph, and with response times being difficult now due to the, you know, growth, traffic, you know, that was a solid move, and you know, continuing to support that, even though it's nice to see Plessinch residents in here, but it's also a statement to say that an individual from Guelph or a neighboring municipality is willing to come into our municipality and service our residents, right? So that's great. And if, you know, I don't know, I'll leave it with you. If that boundary needs to be expanded, you know, I'm sure council would be supportive of it. To get into the report a bit, the 180 days notice for cancellation makes me nervous, but you know, as council is aware, going through the budget process, you know, if that contract were to be canceled on 6 months notice, that's a big, could be a possible difficult decision to make in 6 months. However, I'm sure Cambridge is, you know, if that's their desire, that's their desire. But if we had a full year before cancellation notice, that would be, in my mind, a little bit better situation. But if they'll only do 180 days, that's it is what it is. To touch on what Councillor Balmer was discussing about, you know, the satellite station, and you know that work wasn't for naught, and I agree with that 100%. But I also feel they had a different set of problems to solve them. At the time, my understanding is that, you know, the residents down by the lake were double paying. They're paying for Plessinch Fire at the main station, and then they were paying the service contract. So one of the the thoughts was, well, open up a satellite station, so then that contract may not be required. But I don't believe we had the response time component that's now developed due to growth, traffic, like Guelph's growing, the 401 busy or shutting down, and so that's changed the equation that we're looking at. So I agree, it's not, work isn't lost, but I feel they were trying to fix a different problem, and that problem's now evolved. And also to speak of the tanker, I think Councillor Bulmer, you brought that up just for some information. The Guelph tanker is not staffed all the time either. It prior to COVID was a different animal because nobody could travel, so everybody was staying home. So they had nobody was on vacation. They didn't want to be home more, so they would come to work more. So that tanker maybe was staffed in the last 18 months a little more often, but typically it's not, and they pull from the other apparatus. And so they just adapt, as Chief Big Rig mentioned, for Cambridge, they just adapt once those calls come in, but it's not unusual. The 12 months, back to the employees, I have to make notes all over my paper. My understanding of 12 months for the auxiliary firefighters to be trained up, historically, they went to that model. They would do 12 months as true volunteer, no remuneration. And was the intent on that to show the commitment of the individual to the position? And so is this 12 months a carryover, or is that truly what it takes to train somebody up? I mean, is there a possibility of hiring spree and you just train them for 6-8 weeks straight on Wednesdays or whatever it may be, and then we have them, ready to roll sooner?
So what we've done is we've entered into an arrangement with the rest of the departments in the county, and it's not a written agreement, it's just an arrangement that all county firefighters will be trained at the same time in the same place as a single work unit. The auxiliary firefighters are not paid, but they are on your roll. That is, the municipality insures them. They have WSIB. All of the obligations as if we were their employer are in place, except they do not get paid until they successfully complete the program. And that's what they sign up for. That's what they sign off for when they come on the department. It does take about 12 months. Now, what I will tell you is we do have one or two experienced firefighters from other volunteer departments that are coming close to the community and have asked to come on the department. So they may be fast-tracked onto the department. Quite frankly, we don't have the resources to train people the way we used to. In what you said, 8 or 10 weeks, and they're on their truck, they have the pager. And quite frankly, the extrication training they require and the medical training they require now sucks a lot of time out of these people. And that's where they are doing some of their weekend training. But we're not getting the people until they've actually written the certification exams and they've done their practical skill tests with the OFM. So the training has to be done, and then the certification testing has to be done by the province. Sometimes there's a gap there, but Charles Hamilton, the county training officer, has done the best job he can in coordinating that. And it's a little bit of a dance to get everything to fall into place. But I think the times when we were able to push people through in 2 or 3 months, they're pretty much gone. This county training model is being used pretty much throughout the province. I know that in the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked as interim chief in 3 municipalities, different areas of the province, and they're all engaged in county training to share the cost and to share the instructors. That's the only way that we're able to make that work.
Okay, I'm supportive of the recommendation in the report, Chief. And as council has mentioned, a two-way street of communication. Just show, if you could take it back to the members that we're appreciative of them and what they do and the commitments they do for our township. I understand, I got a young family. Other people have other commitments. It's tough, and we're lucky to have them. And it's not a knock on them. It's we need to get that traffic out of Aberfoyle. so that they can get to the fire station. So that was a little jab at the county. Unless, so we have a recommendation. I'll have Ms. White Fox read the resolution, please.
The council received report FIR 2021-006, Future of the Fire Service, and the council defer further consideration of a second fire station until there is improved, consistent, and dependable business day coverage at the main station, and there is a demonstrated need for a second fire station. And the council approve a 3-year extension of the current fire protection agreement, FPA, with the city of Cambridge, and that council give 3 readings to bylaw 58-2021, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the 3-year fire protection agreement with the city of Cambridge.
All right, can I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Spoulos, seconder. Councillor Goida. Any further comments on this resolution? Councillor Goida?
We did have some discussion about it, and I'm not sure if it should be added to the to what we're talking about here, but there was talk about coming back with a more wholesome report on the strategies and options to improve the delivery of the daytime emergency response. And I'm just wondering if that should be included in what we're approving here today.
Mr. CAO?
It's your choice if you want to. I can tell you that will be an item on the work plan for the coming year. So that is something we plan on bringing forward. But if you want to include it in a resolution, that's totally fine.
Okay, I think it would be a worthwhile to add it to the resolution.
That's an amendment. We'll just maybe get a quick seconder for that, just to make it appropriate. So, Councillor Spoulos, all right. Councillor Goida spoke with it. Councillor Spoulos, you're comfortable with adding that on?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments to the original resolution or the report?
No,
No.
thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bailey, you're comfortable with Councillor Goida's amendment?
Yep, very much.
Okay. Any comments on the original report?
No.
No. And finally, Councillor Bulmer.
All good, used up all my time.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, so all in favor, Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
Favor.
Councillor Bulmer,
In favor.
and that's carried. Thank you, Chief. Great job.
Thank you.
Ms. White Fox, bylaw resolution.
The following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2021-058, being a bylaw to authorize the entering into a fire protection agreement with the corporation of the city of Cambridge for the purpose of fire emergency services.
Over for that, please. Councillor Spoulos, seconded by Councillor Bailey. All in favor, Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
Favor.
Councillor Bulmer.
In favor.
Affirmatory bylaw, please.
That the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2021-059, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Puslinch at its meeting held on the 10th day of November 2021.
You mover for that, please. Councillor Bailey.
Yep.
And seconder, Councillor Goida.
Sure.
Sure.
And all in favor, Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
Favor.
Councillor Bulmer,
In favor.
and adjournment, please.
Council hereby adjourns at 11:13 a.m.
You mover for that, please. Councillor Bulmer,
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Goida, second it.
Sure.
And all in favor, Councillor Goida,
In favor.
Councillor Spoulos,
In favor.
Councillor Bailey,
Favor.
Councillor Bulmer.
In favor.
It's carried. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.